Hi, everyone. Welcome to another episode of the LATAM Stocks Podcast. I'm your host, Patrick Flood. Today I'm speaking with Jose Pacheco. Jose is the CFO and Investor Relations Officer at Odontoprev. Odontoprev is the largest dental insurance company in Brazil. They have a market cap of around 6.6 billion reais, which is about 1.2, 1.3 billion US dollars. The company serves over 8.6 million people in Brazil. So I think this is going to be a fascinating conversation. I can't wait to hear more about the business and the dental industry in Brazil from Jose. So let's get right into it. Hi, Jose. How are you?
Hi, Patrick. Thank you for the invitation.
No, I'm very, very excited for this conversation. And thank you so much for coming on and speaking with me. So before we get into the dental insurance market and Odontoprev's business, can you just tell listeners a little bit about yourself? Where are you from? Where'd you go to school? What was your career path that led you to be the CFO at Odontoprev?
Carioca, as they say, people born in Rio. I'm an economist, spent 20 years working in the mining business. Surprisingly, people invite me to join possible IPO of a dental benefits company. So here's the thing. I came to Odontoprev some 20 years ago. So that's the story.
And you worked there over 20 years and you took over as CFO in 2021. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct.
So you know this business in and out. I'm excited. I'm going to ask you about the history. I guess you can walk me through the history of the dental insurance market as well. So can you just give listeners then an overview of the state of the dental insurance market? What is it like?
Well, dentistry is very popular in Brazil. We have some 20% of the dentists in the world. So say that there are 2 million dentists in the world. Brazil has 20% of that. So obviously dentistry is a hot item and is related to aesthetics, is related to a tropical country. And also it's a female business. The vast majority of professionals of dentists are women. It's a very flexible profession. And so the paradox, Patrick, is the following. Although dentistry is very popular, dental benefits are not. Dental benefits are very, very popular in the US, also in Canada, but not in Brazil. So here's the thing. Odontoprev has been leading this sector since the last century. And anyway, that's the story that consolidates in the IPO of 2006. And since then, we have more than quadrupled the size of the company. Here we are.
I mean, that's a shocking statistic that 20% of the world's dentists are in Brazil with 3 or 4% of global population. But how does it work then? I mean, what's the typical customer profile if dental insurance still isn't as popular as developed markets, but you have all these dentists? So do they not have repeat clients? How does that work?
Say that there are 210 million Brazilians, of which 100 million belong to the middle class, of which only 33 million today count on dental benefits. So although dentists everywhere, again, no other country has the same number of dentists as Brazil, but dental plans are not very well known. It's basically a corporate benefit. So large corporations, they know upside down what we do and what we offer. But the vast majority of people, they pay cash. They have their own dentist. They know someone. There is a dentist next door. So our job is to guarantee high quality services, fully sponsored. We double check every dental procedure. We can further explore that. And that's the Brazilian paradox, if I may say, in the dental activity.
And dental insurance, even in a developing economy, it's still relatively inexpensive, right? I think your average ticket size is around 20 reais, which is about $4 a month. So why not? Why hasn't individual and small business plans caught on?
Well, basically, it's a corporate benefit. So people never heard about it. If you are not a large corporate employee, you never heard about it because dentists are everywhere, can easily access dentists. So let me tell you this. In North America, meaning Canada and the US, say that there are over 200 million Americans today count on dental benefits. And that means the penetration of dental plan members among healthcare plan members is 85%. So we have more than 300 institutional investors from North America. And I have never met someone without a dental plan. They all have dental plans. So it's very well known in North America. And the story is exactly the same in Canada. But again, not in Brazil. If you are large corporate, say the penetration is 90%, 95%. So every large employer already has and provide a dental plan. But a small business owner and families and individuals, they never heard about it. So over the last 10, 15 years, the penetration has been booming. 2.5 million Brazilians, they adhere to the dental benefits industry every year. And that's how we have been growing a lot. But it's a corporate benefit. And we have been pioneers to connect dental benefits not only to the traditional corporate client, but more recently working with a giant distribution channel sponsored by a retail bank. I'm talking about Bradesco. We have been able to explore their giant number of clients. Bradesco today has, according to their IR figures, more than 70 million clients, of which just 4 today count on dental benefits.
So is that same phenomenon true of medical insurance plans in Brazil, that it's mostly a corporate benefit, or is it more common for smaller companies and individuals to have medical insurance?
Medical is mature. Say that today there are 51 million Brazilians with medical plans. This has been the story for basically 10 years in a row. So you should have medical insurance because it's a traditional insurance. The hospital bill can be significant for every family wealth. So people should have medical insurance. That's why medical insurance has been there for so many years. Dental is much younger. If there are, again, 51 million medical plan members, we just mentioned 33 million dental plan members. So dental is underpenetrated. It equals only 5% of the price of a medical plan. So it is affordable. And now what we need to do, and the opportunity is to make it more popular, not focusing only or not only depending on corporations, but actually exploring much bigger addressable market. That's why SMEs are so important. There are much more people working in America, also in Brazil, for small business, not to mention families and individuals.
So I ask you about the medical insurance because one of the things that stands out about Odontoprev is that you are a pure play dental insurance company, whereas most of your competitors are medical and dental. So what's behind that decision? Like you mentioned that medical insurance is mature in Brazil. Is it just that you see such a huge opportunity in dental insurance that you choose to be focused? Why not a mixed offer when your competitors are?
Well, basically, Odontoprev was founded in the 80s by a group of dentists. In the 90s, the company became a market leader. The IPO was made in 2006. So since day one, we were absolutely dedicated to dental benefits, doing a great job on every detail. At the end of the day, we double check every cent of our P&L. As you just mentioned, our average ticket equals $5 or $6 American dollars per month. So again, this probably presents the cheapest private dentistry in the world. And the beauty, Patrick, of the business model is to really double check, is to have a second opinion on every dental treatment. And the way we do that is to double check and to ask x-rays and digital pictures of every treatment. And as you mentioned before, we have nearly 9 million clients as we speak. So just to give you an idea of the rhythm, we double check every day more than 25,000 dental treatments coming from 100% of the Brazilian states, covering nearly 3,000 cities.
So that brings me to a question I want to ask you. You highlight in your materials your proprietary IT platform. So you've been around since the 80s, you've been public since 2006. You probably have the largest database of dental care data in Brazil. And like you mentioned, you can double check everything. That gives you, I imagine, pricing advantages. I think you highlight in one of your materials, fraud detection advantages. So can you just tell me a little more about your IT platform? What kind of data do you have? How do you use it?
That's a very relevant point, an element of the business model. It's a proprietary dental IT platform that double checks every dental treatment. I'm talking about 25,000 dental treatments per day. That's the rhythm. So when one of our clients, they visit a dentist, we ask the dentist to upload in our system information, meaning images or x-rays, before and after every dental treatment. That represents a huge data bank. At the end of the day, we understand the behavioral risk of dentists and how people behave over time. That means that we control the quality and the execution and the performance of dentists. We stratify the dentist, and we can predict what's going to happen to your utilization. Dentistry is highly predictable in exchange of frequency. The higher the frequency, the better the profile, and that's how we mitigate the risk of expensive and unnecessary treatments. So prevention makes a hell of a difference in the dental business, and the Prev of Odontoprev comes from prevention,
So do you have dentists that are physically verifying these x-rays and everything, or is part of the IT platform that you have software that can read the x-rays themselves and tell you whether there's a cavity or not, for example?
Both situations are correct. Say that over time, making use of AI, we are improving our IT tools in order to allow our internal dentists to do a better job, to speed up their process. So there are academic protocols that must be followed in order to understand who was the patient, who was the dentist, what happened in your mouth. And then we have a perfect figure of the situation. We analyze it, and in few seconds, there is a decision. And then we reimburse the dentist for this execution. That means very high quality services to the vast majority of S&P 500 companies doing business in Brazil. They know what we do. Therefore, we keep a long-term relationship with those people. Now, the opportunity, as you mentioned, is to bring the middle class to this business model.
Yeah, you have this amazing slide on your corporate presentation that shows the cost curve by age of medical insurance compared to dental insurance. And you mentioned how consistent it is. And right, you have x-rays of the client's mouth. And with medical insurance, it gets more expensive. For a 60-year-old is more expensive than when they're 50, and a 70-year-old and an 80-year-old. But with dental insurance, no, it ramps up for about the first 2 years. And then once they get everything taken care of and the original cavities filled and everything, it's stable. It's not more expensive for an 80-year-old to have dental insurance than a 40-year-old.
Patrick, you are totally correct. Medical inflation is a global problem. There is no easy answer for that. So due to aging and better technology, increasing technology, we will live more, but there is a cost pressure. So the older you are, the more expensive it will be for your healthcare plan. The beauty of the Odontoprev is the following. Well, as we are limited to the dental business, as we treat people, as we bring people to visit dentists, ideally twice a year, we can predict, we can keep high quality services and avoid the expensive treatments like, root canals or even cavities. So if you come twice a year, that's the ideal place, the ideal frequency to allow dentists to keep the best possible oral care for you. So prevention is the name of the game. That's why, again, the Prev of Odontoprev means dental prevention at the end of the day. So we are adding value for, our clients. We are adding value for dentists, making sure that more and more people will visit. At the end of the day, we are adding value to shareholders.
Interesting. So let's talk about market consolidation, because you mentioned that as an ongoing strategy in your financials. But it looks like after the IPO, you were very active in acquisitions, right? After the IPO in 2007, 2008, you made 8 acquisitions. But it seems like you've made less acquisitions recently. So has the dental insurance market in Brazil fully consolidated? Are there more consolidations in the future, do you think? Do you expect to see your competitors consolidate, or what's your outlook?
The story is the following. We IPO'd the company in 2006, and right after that, the competitive landscape was very tough. Our number one rival at that time was Bradesco Dental, and they were growing real fast. They tripled their number of clients in a few years' time from 2006 to 2009. So, Patrick, our organic growth was nearly zero. because due to the aggressiveness of Bradesco in this particular cycle. So the only possible solution was to make acquisitions. So with the proceeds of the 2006, we were able to make, as you mentioned, many acquisitions in 2007, in 2008, and also in 2009. At the end of 2009, Odontoprev and Bradesco sit together, and this strategic alliance was executed. So Bradesco became our shareholder and controlling shareholder in exchange of their dental operations. And say on perpetuity, we will have the opportunity to explore their massive number of clients, distribution at the bank, at the insurance platform, and some other business units. So after 2009, Odontoprev became an organic story. Having said that, later in 2014, another JV was established, this time with Bank of Brazil. So before the IPO of BB Seguridade, that's the insurance arm of Bank of Brazil, we created a new company, BB Dental. And so today we have basically two bank insurance channels. Number one, Bradesco, that equals some 4.3 million clients. And number two, BB Dental, that we share the control with Bank of Brazil with 500,000 clients. So bank assurance is now very important for us. And we believe we are building up, a very interesting customer platform coming from not only the traditional corporate clients, but also to some more mid-sized clients, the SME clients, and more recently, individuals. When we do that, provided the fact that bank insurance is allowing us a better premium, a lower cost, there has been a margin expansion. So in the first cycle, our loss ratio, Patrick, and people will not believe this figure, our loss ratio has been 45% in the first 14, 15 years after the IPO, and now it came down to 40%. Some people say that's the very best loss ratio in the healthcare insurance business in the world. That's up to you to double check. That translates in an EBITDA margin of 25% now, running very close to 30%. That comes as a result of, this type of customer profile where through bancassurance and traditional broker distribution, we have been following a very rational pricing strategy, having an extremely efficient cost structure in an asset-light business model, and at the end of the day, bringing shareholders and investors, and most of our float is North American, second to none payout ratio. You just mentioned the 90%, 95% payout ratio, and that is here to stay.
Yeah. So let's dig in. I'll ask you a few more questions about the business model more specifically. So you mentioned EBITDA margins, right? And a lot of investors hear that and they think, yeah, okay, but depreciation and interest expense matters. But you have a zero debt strategy and you also have an asset light strategy, so very low on depreciation. So your EBITDA margin is an EBIT margin for all practical purposes.
Absolutely. Actually, say that we have nearly zero financial expense. What we do have is financial income. And let me remind the audience that Brazil has one of the highest real interest rates in the world, and having a nearly 1 billion BRL of cash, that translates in roughly 200 million net cash position, zero debt. We make some 10% interest on that every year. That translates in a 25 billion US dollars financial income each and every year. That is one more reason for the cash dividends.
So then let me ask you then about the fixed income portfolio that you manage. You're the CFO. As you mentioned, Brazil still has very high real rates, but we're in a rate cutting cycle in Brazil. So rates have come down significantly. So how do you manage your liquidity portfolio? Do you manage duration based on the average cost curve in the chart we talked about earlier? What does it look like for you to manage a portfolio?
Well, basically, as we face negative working capital needs, Patrick, and low capital expenditures requirements, basically what we dedicate some 5% of our revenues to technology. So that means that the vast majority of the cash generation is dedicated to cash dividends. And how do we manage the financial portfolio? Basically, we purchase treasury bonds running a AAA risk domestically. It's basically long-term, 85% long-term. That means that we benefit of the real interest rates in Brazil, definitely 4 to 500 basis points over inflation. This is really interesting. So we know for sure that having a duration of 5 to 7 years, so we know already there will be significant financial revenues for the upcoming 5 to 7 years. And then the excess cash we pay out. So basically, that's why I mentioned before, 95% of our net income represents cash dividends. So as we speak, cash dividends and possible buybacks, we are always keep an eye on the share price. That equals some 8-9% dividend yield as we speak.
Yeah, so worth mentioning that I think it was last week you approved the largest dividend payout in the company's history based on 2023's result. Yes. So yes, 95%. And I imagine 2023 was a very good year if it's the largest dividend payout in the company's history.
Yeah, EPS came up by 18% last year as compared to 22. The recent AGM just approved it 427 million cash dividend that when we add to interest on capital, that represents some 95% of our 2003 net income.
Great. So you use a term that I like that's really interesting. So I'm going to ask you to explain it a little more. You talk about negative working capital. So what does that mean specifically? On the next little bubble in your presentation, you have prepaid expenses or the clients prepay, right? So do your corporate clients prepay annually? Is that what you mean by net working capital? Can you just explain that in a little more detail?
Yeah, basically we have monthly revenue. Say that a certain client normally pay us monthly. And as people pay us, they have the right to visit the dentist network, say in a couple of months or after 90 days. So when they visit dentists, then we reimburse the dentist. That describes, Patrick, that we have prepaid revenues, say every month or every day, we are getting revenues from clients. And then after a couple of months, normally, the treatment will be executed or after 90 days or depending on the treatment, even after 18 months. So that's what we mean by negative working capital needs. That's why we never had that in history. That's why basically we pay out as much as possible, as fast as possible.
So you have a very shareholder-friendly management capital structure, however you want to phrase it. So I guess two questions. Obviously, we talked about the payout ratio, and when you're returning 95%, obviously you're doing right by your shareholders, but your largest shareholder is Bradesco. So I think a lot of listeners might be interested. They don't know very much about Brazilian markets in general. So what does it actually mean to be, have one of the largest banks be your controlling shareholder? What's that relationship like? Does it change anything from a reporting perspective when you produce your financials? Any insight would be interesting.
Bradesco is one of the key financial institutions in Latin America. Bradesco is listed in the US, is listed in Europe, also listed in Brazil. They have participations in so many different companies, not only a bank, but also extremely important, the largest insurance platform in Latin America. So Bradesco became our shareholder in 2009. And since then, not only we benefit of the massive number of clients of Bradesco, again, they sell every day. They have a nationwide distribution at the bank, at the insurance platform, also some digital partnerships. So it's fantastic to have such a committed distribution channel that is not only, Patrick, a distribution channel, but a very efficient distribution channel. Let me clarify. As they approach small business owners, as they approach individual clients, they know the credit rating of those people. They know the cash flow of those people. So they mitigate possible bad debt to minimum. In other words, they can cross-sell dental over, of course, healthcare, but this is also an extremely important healthcare player in this country. But again, a huge financial organization. So the cross-selling opportunities are immense, and there is a perfect alignment as we discuss the projects and the activities from now on. We are absolutely proud of that. And again, this is definitely one of our moats in order to explore future opportunities.
So very clearly a strategic investor, not just a financial investor.
Absolutely.
So they're very, very invested in the long-term success of Odontoprev. So you mentioned buybacks, and I know it's not a fair question for a CFO to talk about the stock price, but you do have a chart showing, Odontoprev stock price, ex-dividend, and it outperforms. You've outperformed the benchmark since 2016. But if you look at the chart, it's fairly stagnant, right? You've been pretty much range bound. And I noticed that in 2023, you didn't make any buybacks. Price was up a little bit. So can you just maybe explain the price action to me a little bit? Like why, in spite of all this growth in the number of beneficiaries, the high payout ratio, right? The clean balance sheet, why is, in your opinion, again, it's not a fair question for the CFO to talk about stock price, but why is the market cap still below where it was in like 2019?
Well, we believe, Patrick, there is misperception from the streets. That's why back in 21, we started some buyback programs. We are now executing buyback program number 4. So on top of that, we keep a very, very high payout ratio. So please expect, heavy cash dividend payments. And on top of that, provided the fact, again, that we have no debt, we also keep an eye on the share price. So the combination of cash dividends plus buyback activities should represent this 90-95% payout ratio. I think the pandemic of 2020 represented a misperception in terms of the value proposition and the growth opportunities for Odontoprev. At that time, the utilization came down, everyone was home, clients were home, dentists were home, so the utilization was low. We were able to offer discounts in 2020 for the vast majority of our clients, and the cash generation that year was tremendous, all-time high cash generation in a very unusual year of 2020. Of course, in 21 and 22, things started to come back to normal, and here we are to a new customer portfolio and a way more efficient auditing process and IT tools. We are now able to bring people and to bring investors a way better return and profitability than before. But the vast majority of the reports are still, say, dedicated to healthcare. And in the healthcare business, it's just the opposite. The loss ratio has been in Brazil, in America, and also in Europe, way above historical levels. So when people realize that in the dental business, the perception is different, in the dental business, the reality is different, and more specifically at Odontoprev, the best-in-class portfolio and the new customer profile and new IT tools, they are helping us at the end of the day to deliver a margin expansion. I think, that's the story that we have been actually delivering for 4 years in a row after 2020. That's why we have been repurchasing shares. That's why we believe that, in our opinion, there is misperception coming from Wall Street.
Yeah, I think that's very fair that there's probably a category error to group you in with medical insurance, because I had never stopped to think about the difference between dental insurance and medical insurance. And like I mentioned, the slide you have showing the cost curve, and it was a light bulb for me because, if you were to just look at the category of medical insurance, then you look at demographics and healthcare costs, like the healthcare inflation, like you mentioned, it's a different profile than the dental insurance business for sure. So I think that's
absolutely
fair.
Maybe one of the key metrics is the so-called medical loss ratio. In America, healthcare insurance is extremely important. And people know that the medical loss ratio in America, and Brazil is no different, remains in the neighborhood of 80, 85, or even 90%. We listed our shares again in 06. And since day one, we have been keeping a lower than 50% dental loss ratio. And more recently, our, the loss ratio has been actually 40%. So that's why I mentioned before, well, some people just told us this may be the best-in-class loss ratio, but again, it's dental, not medical. And the asset light and the IT platform that we have in place is not that easy to replicate. So that's what we do.
So let me ask you a little about the shareholder base. So you have a pretty international shareholder base. So can you just tell me, is it mostly institutional? Is it retail? How are these international investors accessing Odontoprev stock?
Well, basically institutional. Patrick, since day one back in '06, we were on the road introducing the unique business model. We have never met similar business model. We would be delighted to exchange ideas if anyone brings a similar business model. So from North America to Asia to South Africa and the vast majority of European countries, today we are proud to tell you that more than 30 countries count on Odontoprev shareholders, and that normally takes some years for people to digest and to monitor the numbers and to double check, etc. We love that. And again, we are absolutely proud of having, a very demanding, I would say, shareholder base. They know upside down what we do. They follow the numbers. And good news and bad news. The bad news is that if they understand, if they like the story, they don't sell the shares. That means very low liquidity. But anyway, that's how it works. It's also a challenge when we want to buy back the shares. But, we all compete on the trading floor. That's how it works. So very, very high quality shareholder base. The float is 90% global, just 10% local Brazilian. And people that understand the story, people that pay a lot of attention to corporate governance. And, we exchange ideas a lot. We love to learn from the street. We love the feedback. We like, again, to exchange ideas, both with the buy side and the sell side.
Great. So let me ask you about the ADR program, because I mentioned before we started talking, and I talked to Brazilian CFOs, I get very mixed opinions about ADRs. Some are delisting because Odontoprev had an ADR and delisted, and then some fantastic Brazilian companies that are about to list an ADR. So they're actively going through the process. Can you just talk a little bit about the history of the Odontoprev ADR and how you view the program as a CFO in Brazil?
Well, basically, healthcare is a very, very popular sector in capital markets in America. But we have very few healthcare institutional investors. So we started to present at conferences and to visit people, and the story was very welcome. But the real thing is, although the liquidity is not big enough, and when we introduced it, ADR level 1 is when you issue the ADR, but you are not raising capital. It just to allow to people to trade over the counter. So, but people have a mandate limited to ADR level 3. So if you are not listed in the New York Exchange or any other stock exchange, they don't have normally the mandate to purchase shares in the Brazilian B3 or, on the OTC basis. So that's why basically the vast majority of the healthcare investors, they are limited to North American shares. And that's basically why we do not count at the end of the day with healthcare institutional investors from the US. So our US investors, they are global. They do have a mandate to purchase shares straight at the São Paulo Stock Exchange.
Interesting. Jose, that was a fascinating conversation. Is there anything about Odontoprev or the industry that we didn't cover that you think might be interesting for the audience?
Well, basically, this Brazilian paradox is the key message. The largest number of dentists in the world and a massive tropical country where dentistry is very popular, but dental plans are not. So in less than 2 decades, we quadrupled the number of clients and bringing people, second to none EBITDA margin, if you want, and cash dividends. So this has been a great pleasure, Patrick. Thank you so much for the invitation again. And congratulations. As it's a really interesting way of bringing information to people and let people know about unusual business models, just like Odontoprev.
Well, thank you again. And then if there's ever anything you want to come on and speak to the audience again, you're always welcome back. Where can listeners learn more about Odontoprev, the equity, if they want to reach out to you? Where would you send them?
Well, first of all, I dedicated IR website at odontoprev.com.br/IR, or people can email us straight at ir@odontoprev.com.br. It will be a pleasure.
And I will link those into the show notes for anyone listening. Thank you so much, Jose.
Fantastic.
This was a pleasure.
Patrick, thank you so much again.
Bye-bye.